Good evening, St. Louis, and welcome into City Hub postgame here on Sports Hub STL. Of course, City Hub postgame is brought to you by Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games, all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com and by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Will, we got to get into this one immediately. The chat is already blowing up. This is this is just a rough game. Even 2-0 against Kansas City was one thing. 4-1 in the manner that we just watched is a completely different thing. That's the roughest game of the season. Take away the rivalry factor, take away everything else. That was terrible. That was inexcusable. That was backtracking from everything we saw over the last month. And that's probably the worst part about it. Your opening thoughts on a rough night in Seattle.
Listen, this is a little Sports Hub STL After Dark, so let's rip the Band-Aid off of the family friendly. That was an absolute shit show, and there is no excuse for that. That was not a good match from St. Louis City SC. In previous matches, I've consistently talked about some positives to take away. I've got two for you, and it'll take me about 2 seconds to get through them. Edouard Leuven touched the pitch, and Xande Silva is fast as hell. That's about all we got. Everything else was an absolute dumpster fire of dog shit, so that's where we're at tonight. And I'm excited to be here on Sports Hub STL, break it down with you guys. So get those questions and comments going in the chat, and Rock and I will talk through it with you tonight. Rock,
yes.
What's your thought off the bat?
I mean, it was terrible. There's not a lot of redeeming things beyond the interplay between Hartel, Wallum, and Horn on the left side. That's fun. That created really the only good things. But you can't just praise a piece of connection that creates a little bit when you're getting out touched in the box. 51-9. 51-9. That's the third time, and all of them have been the away games on the West Coast where they couldn't get double digit with touches in the box. That's just the offense is not doing enough. And so even with those small positives, the majority of it's negative, and it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough offensively, and the defense had lapses, and it wasn't just guys like Kyle Hebert and Akil Watts who had big lapses while they've made solid plays. Timo Baumgartel, bad plays all around. Joachim Nielsen gets lucky on one play, and then I know it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but did not make a good read on what should have been the fourth goal. So just no one played well. No aspect of the team was good, especially after the 30th minute. The first 30 minutes, honestly, if you could have extended that across 90, probably not a terrible game. Probably something similar to what we saw in against LAFC. Not good enough, but not terrible. But the solid first 30 minutes, just an abominable final 60. And I'm T. Welcher. I think a lot of people, Thomas Welch of Sports Hub STL fame, and obviously looking great with the hair. It looks different. He's got to update that profile picture. He says, I'm going to be sick. Samuel House says, JJ Weatherholt sick or Connor Hellebuck sick. Yeah, Connor Hellebuck sick. Connor Hellebuck going through my mind a lot tonight. It wasn't the goaltender's fault. That's not a shot at Ben Lunt. It was more just the complete lack of
left out to try every time.
Yeah, Ben Lunt. You cannot. A goaltender has nightmares, I imagine, about nights where he gives up a penalty kick and a deflection. Just unfair on the first two goals for him. And then the other ones, you can put them completely on poor play from the defense. Just nothing good, Will. I have nothing positive to say about that game.
Yeah, I have nothing positive. And on the Ben Lunt, conversation, look, sure, that's a player. Yeah, and he's playing till the end of the match. Down 4-1 in stoppage time, he's still coming up with a pretty sizable save in that part. Obviously, it did not matter at all. Besides the mental aspect of keeping a ball out of his net, the match was long since over at that point. But St. Louis just did not look good. And if you're talking about choking in moments that matter, this was not a match that necessarily mattered that much to me. It's not a match I necessarily expected to win. So it's not a Connor Hellebuck level choke for me, but the part that really bothers me is just that it wasn't anywhere near an acceptable performance. Had we lost that game and played, a decent game, we'd be talking about some positives again, like I've tended to do on a lot of these City Hub shows so far. But after that match, I've got nothing positive to take away, and so there's a lot to break down on the negatives for sure.
Yeah, and for me, the players aren't doing enough. The plan isn't enough. I'm questioning why we see almost the exact same lineup that we saw. I broke it down. I had rationales for why we saw it, and I think I kind of hit a lot of them, but I'm not sure what has caused them to go away from Celio Pompeu in the starting lineup. But those 3 games where he started were different, and they didn't get wins because now they're on a 7-game streak of dropping points. They didn't get wins, but those 3 games were different. The production on the offense was different, and it has been completely just sucked away and evaporated over the last game and a half outside of the second half when he was there. And I know he made a mistake and he caused the turnover that probably lost them 2 points. That's a fair criticism, 100%. But that's obvious. And somebody in the comments on Twitter on the other side, we're going to keep getting to your YouTube comments. Great job, by the way. Said Silva looked better than anyone on the ball that we have, and he didn't start for Atlanta. I like the guys for our team. I just can't decide if they're good enough or if it's the coach of the system. Couple things there. First of all, that's Celio Pompeu eraser. Celio Pompeu is fantastic on the ball, and statistically one of the best guys in a small amount of time last year in the MLS on the ball. He's been fantastic this year. I have not looked at his league stats to know if it is as good relative to the rest of the league. But a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people in the comments on Twitter, I don't know if you're getting this on your social medias as well, are asking a lot of those similar questions in the second part, which is it the fact that the team's not good enough? Is it the fact that the system's not good enough? How much do you criticize Lutz for the team not being good enough? I think those are all fair questions right now, because when you can get dog walked like that by a team, it's bad. Now, the other
missing 3 of their best attackers. That's a very important piece to mention here, is that Seattle was not at full strength. It's not like City was. We know that City is a team that's hurting right now. But when you have depth versus depth, and you're getting absolutely pummeled 4-1 like that, I mean, it's just not. It's not good enough.
I agree with you there. Hayden Henelban, excuse me. That was a tough one. I hope I didn't completely butcher it. Just a disgusting performance all around. I'm going to agree with you on that one. Yeah, there's again. Tito Wohlrich's right on this one. Woof, another lackluster effort. I got to know if Tito had a wager on this one. Our friend from the Domesticated Gamblers, Samuel Howe, just call me Doctor. Let me call Dr. Montgomery for you. T. Welch at 15. Yeah,
that's what we need. We need a guy with a PhD, bro.
Yeah, the doctor of coaching can probably figure this one out. This coaching staff, Woof. Listen, I'm not going to say. Listen, obviously, I disagree with some of the decisions they're making, but and I was going with this on Twitter. They want to push the ball. Olaf wants to score. He doesn't want to play only defense unless he's lying to us. But when your best player in Marcel Hartl can't complete a progressive pass or through ball in the second half, and that's what are you supposed to do? That your system built a couple chances for Hartl in the second half, and he just wasn't completing them. And again, it's not only on the players. There is a point where I'm wondering why we're seeing certain things. But this isn't, and that's why this isn't 100% on anyone. There's a lot to blame. There's a lot of blame to go around.
Yeah, and looking at what Aaron Ed said, Watts was trash tonight. Look, I agree. Watts had a terrible match, and it's not just Watts though. Like the midfield as a whole was completely obsolete. It was like a bunch of traffic cones. They couldn't receive the ball. They couldn't pass the ball. Couldn't dribble with the ball. Outside of that first 30-minute spurt, obviously Hartl had some really good looks, especially himself in that first 30-minute window. But as soon as that was done, there was nothing coming out of that midfield. And the low block defense that's been so successful for City in mitigating chances was even completely more obsolete because Watts doesn't offer any kind of stopping power. He's not very physical. He doesn't really do super well to stay square to the ball. He's better in those like side by side, running defending situations, but Seattle wasn't really playing like that. So it was just an absolute mess in the midfield. And for me, that was my biggest thing is, Melberg is the one to blame for this because why are you putting the squad in this situation? Obviously, you can't start Leuven. And let's make this clear, by the way. Starting Leuven would have been a complete mistake. And if you're saying, if anyone out there is saying he's on the bench, he should have started, you're wrong. You're missing a lot of underlying information, but you can't start Leuven there. Morales is suspended. You get Ostrak in there. I'm okay with that. I like Ostrak getting in there. JGR
but hold on a second. Can I stop you right there, Will?
Yeah.
That it was almost the exact same lineup except for Watts for Morales. And that makes sense considering there's no center midi depth. So I know you like Ostrak, I like Ostrak, but that's the exact same lineup that gave you the first half against LAFC. So I know I'm okay with Ustrak. But in this exact same configuration, and they changed it up. I don't think we saw this like 5-1-3-1 where Ustrak's deep and Watts is out wide up right. I don't think we saw that against LAFC. We saw a similar kind of usage last time against Seattle. So clearly they like overloading the flanks against Seattle, even though it didn't work. So I like it too, but I'm baffled by those decisions as well.
Yeah, and kind of where I was going with that too is we saw that it didn't work against LAFC. So why is Olaf Melberg throwing this out there and not kind of playing to what he has in the arsenal? Obviously, you want to run that 3-5-2. That's his bread and butter. That's the system that the team wants to play, and that's fine. But with the personnel available, why are you not letting a guy like Joey Zielinski get in on the right wing back position and run a 4-4-2 where Cedric Toyshirt's going to be more valuable? Celio Pompeu, if you take him off the bench, is going to be more valuable. Zande Silva off the bench is going to be more valuable. Joao Klaus maybe is more valuable in that situation. I don't think he had a terrible match. He was pretty useless, but I think that was more for a lack of anyone being able to get the ball to him rather than him not doing anything productive. The few times he was on the ball, I thought he was fine. He was making a couple of really threatening runs in, and then the passes to him, those through balls, whatever it may be, were completely off the mark, and those chances were wasted. So, maybe he gets more value in a 4-4-2 where Toyshirt's doing a little better. Obviously, Vollum is way more poised for that 4-4-2 where he can get a little higher up the pitch and be involved in the attack. So I understand the 3-5-2 is what Melberg wants to run, and I'm okay with that, especially in the long run of things. But in this specific match in Seattle at Lumen Field on May 4th at 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, why the hell are we not trying the 4-4-2?
Yep. They did get to it in a couple of attacking points, especially in the second half. Wallum was moved up into the midfield.
Yeah, but it was a mess. And you throw in Joyner into that mess. That's unfair to that kid. I mean, that's just a stupid decision. I understand that, an injury kind of forced that, and that's kind of, tough. And I respect Joyner for still, getting out on the pitch and just doing what coach tells him to do. But, Melberg's setting him up for failure there. And, I just don't like that substitution. But obviously, that's tough with an injury in the limited roster. But I think Melberg's got to start the match with that 4-4-2 and let them ease into the match. And if things are going terribly from the jump, then you go to your comfort. You go back to your City 2.0 that Lutz likes with your 3-5-2, and you just see what happens and then let the players do what they sort of know how to do, I guess, in training. But everything for me just didn't make sense with Melberg. And Lutz Van den Steel talked about you need 10 matches to see what a manager's really capable of. Well, now we've seen 11, and I've seen a whole lot of bullshit. So I want to see more from Olaf Melberg. I want to see better decisions, better substitutions. Obviously, injuries are a huge component of this, and that's okay. And I cut him slack for that. No problem there. But just some of the decisions are baffling.
Sorry, my face is because there was a little bit of an audio issue in the post-game presser. Olaf's starting to talk, by the way. He's opening his comment, by the way, saying that he thought they played pretty well up until Seattle scored their penalty. Kind of like what we were saying, first 30 minutes, not that bad. Last 60 minutes, we'll see what Olaf has to say about it. I'll try to relay what I can as people can keep making the mistake of jumping into the presser with their audio on. Come on, guys. Aaron Ed here. You guys are professionals on the YouTube chat. Keep it coming here. Aaron Ebb, watching my club give up in front of my eyes is disheartening. I don't care if we win 1-0 or 10-0 on Wednesday versus Omaha. We need a major philosophy change. Lost versus Kansas in 2 weeks and fire everyone. I feel like that's going to be a very common thought process from a lot of people. It was a struggling game tonight, and I if you're angry as a City fan, I feel you 100%. I understand why. That was a rough game, and it's hard to rationalize things. I don't think this game automatically means that they're completely bereft of talent relative to the rest of the MLS. I still think they're probably about middle of the pack there, but they're not playing even up to their talent level, and that's where you get pissed off, and that's where it's fair.
Exactly, and that's my frustration. Like I said, injured roster, all those kinds of things. But you gotta put a better performance in that. St. Louis City SC have a roster that is not bottom of the table in the Western Conference, not bottom of the table.
Standard. I'm not saying they should be anything in top 4 necessarily, but they should be fighting for a 5, 6, 7 seed. And some people, that's not going to be good enough either because of what happened in the first year. But I still think that would be good enough, and they're nowhere near that right now, and that's disappointing. That this is supposed to be a playoff team. If you listen to the conversations in the offseason from the owner and the sporting director, and they're nowhere near a playoff team right now. They're failing to reach the goal that they self-prescribed, and that's it's a tough point for a lot of people in the building.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And Samuel Howe comes in and says there's no relegation in MLS, so that's positive. And that he's right. That shouldn't be a conversation that the most storied soccer town in the United States should be having about their MLS team right now. 11 matches into a regular season, a roster that is somewhere around like I think 12 to 15th in spending in the entire league. On paper, it's a good roster. Obviously, a lot of injuries. I cut some slack. New coach. There's some slack, but not this much. Definitely nowhere near this much slack.
The Carpe Noctem project, I like seize the night. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean, but okay. I don't really even feel anything anymore when we get scored on. Yeah, it started getting to that point where it just how deep does it hurt when they keep firing in like that? There could have been 6 or 7 goals from Seattle. 50 touches in the box is that's a ridiculous amount. That's unbelievable from them. Clayton Presson comes in, jumping in here on the YouTube chat. You guys are killing it on the YouTube chat. Make sure to keep commenting. Make sure you like and subscribe us here on Sports Hub STL. We go live after all events, no matter what time they're at. We learned that last night with the Blues. You're learning that tonight with St. Louis City. When a game finishes up, we're going live to talk about it. Clayton Presson, does the real problem lie with the coaching staff? Hartle, Toyshirt, and Bescher came in late last year and did phenomenally. Now they've spent time on our system. They aren't delivering. I think Hartel's been placed in a role that isn't the best for him, and he's talked about that. He's doing his best. He's tracking back. He's playing good defense, gets caught ball watching in moments, but still, he's putting in the effort, and you got to respect that. Toyshirt was credit to the coaching staff, at least for a little bit. They put Toyshirt in a better spot for his usual role today. They centered him, and they got him in that 9.5 behind the striker role he likes. So we have to give them credit for that switch. That was smart. And Bescher, I think he's shown stuff this year. He has one of the highest, expected XGs of all City strikers, and he hasn't been putting them in. He hasn't been getting those chances lately, but that was the case for him earlier, and they'd have another win if he was finishing at the level people want him to. And so everyone's struggling a little bit. It is part of the system, but it is part of players just not stepping up. Now, how much of that is because of the system? That's a fair question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the coaching staff is not always, the scapegoat. And I think in professional sports in North America, especially, that's become a very common theme. The team does bad and immediately the coach should be fired.
Coaches, the world soccer is like the NHL. It's insane the way world soccer teams go through coaches. So I don't think it's an American thing.
Yeah, no. I just mean it's something that a lot of folks have seen in the St. Louis area across other teams that they follow in their North American leagues, and obviously and abroad. And look, with Hartle, Toyshirt, and Betcher, things were a lot different under John Hackworth at the end of 2024 than they have been at the start of 2025. At the end of 2024, you have nothing to lose, only something to gain. You're fearless. You have no restrictions. You can just throw numbers forward and see if you can knock some goals in. And that was very favorable for Betcher and Toyshirt, who were just capitalizing on loose change a lot of the times in the box. And that was good stuff. Obviously, Hartle was doing really well to create because he was allowed to be higher up the pitch, but City were also conceding way more goals, and they really weren't in a lot of matches unless they were dominating the attack. And, as a result of that. So I do like Melberg's style better. It's a little less fast paced. It's a little more boring for people who don't necessarily appreciate like long possession sequences and understand that low block defending can lead to a lot of goals at times when done correctly. And I think a lot of that's just, fans don't like it because it really hasn't been done correctly so far in 2025. So it looks pretty unattractive, but if things can get figured out, it'll be fine. But right now there is a lot of caution that needs to be, brought to the table here.
To Olaf's point, he's talking right now. They was asked about the play of Zonde Silva. He points out that in the second half and the last hour, they did nothing well, essentially. So he's owning up to that. He's saying Zonde did pretty, Zonde showed something, but not a lot of positives coming from Olaf. So at least we're seeing some honesty right now about how it sounds like, he's pretty disappointed in this one right now. It'll be interesting to see how the players are reacting. Thomas Welch, I really like Lutz, though. Can hear him screaming swear words every game when it's close. His passion for this team is exactly what I want from a guy in his position. I agree with that one. I like Lutz's outlook. I like the fact that he wants a team that's constantly pressing. I like the fact that he's willing to pivot from one coach who's going to go gung-ho with it to another coach where he says, I'm going to pull it back a little bit, but we still are going to want to do it. I like that from Lutz. I like that he has a focus on the academy. Yeah. I think criticizing some of the moves he's made is getting nitpicky. I think he's made a lot of solid moves considering the budget he's working with. I have a comment here on X that I'm looking at. Lutz has had 5 years to build this roster and the system. It's clear that this is not going anywhere. Time to cut bait. Time to let Lutz go. And I'm not the only City fan saying this. I know you're not the only City fan saying this, but I'm not going to agree with any of you. I'm just not going to agree with any of you. I think, he didn't put a team on the field for the first 3 years of that 5-year window, and so I'm willing to give him more time because the academy system's working well and they got a lot of work to do on the field. But I see an organization that's trying to be proactive more often than not. And that's what I'm looking for from my teams. I want adults in positions making decisions for the right reasons. And I still believe that's what's happening at St. Louis City. Their decisions right now are not working. And like I said, they're failing to reach the goal that they self-proclaimed. So something has to change. Things have to get better. But I firmly believe that there are people there who are working their asses off to try to get it better. Carpe Noctem says there's less and less effort as time goes by. And that's just going to be one of those things where I disagree with that perception of what's going on here.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing on Lutz in this whole conversation. I just want to remind fans what the timeline is really supposed to look like for an expansion side and when you can expect them to actually be good. So you get an expansion team, right? That's step one. You get MLS to say, hey, you now have a team. You can build your stadium and you have a team. And you build your stadium and you start founding your academies, you build your facilities and all those types of things, right? And you have a year where you're playing in MLS Next, or your guys can get those minutes as you build, you start to sign players, build your roster, that type of thing. But when you get an expansion side that overperforms like St. Louis did in 2023, you set the bar way too high for the fans. And that's a good thing because you want your fans to expect a lot from the team. And obviously it's good to overperform and get results. It's always exciting and fun. But at the end of the day, fans need to come back down to earth and remind themselves that an expansion side doesn't magically become dominant in the league unless you're in, LA, where, every single 35-year-old legend from the Premier League and Bundesliga wants to come play and retire there, basically. That's a different story. But in any other city besides like LA or maybe Miami right now, you're not going to have that type of situation. So what you end up actually having is, a manager like Lutz who's going to sign some older players. The age of the team is going to be slightly higher. Why? Because you need to establish veteran leadership and you need to establish the fundamental basis of what your club is. Are you a high press? Are you a low press? Like what is your style of playing? You get some older players who have experience and can come into a new situation and create your standard, right? And then all that time that you're spending with them in your first 3 to 5 years in the league, you're developing your academies. What's St. Louis doing right now? They're U15s, 14, 16, 17. They're kicking ass, by the way. In case you guys haven't been watching, they are doing exceptionally well. That is a great sign because in about 5 years, when those players are ready to potentially become MLS contributors, then you now have a club that has a feeder system that's successful with loads and loads of prospects just rolling through every year. And you have kids from around the country and even around the world moving to St. Louis to join these academies. And that is how you build a successful club in the long term. If you just go out and spend $50 million in your first year on a bunch of players, that's cool. And you might win a championship in the first 3, but what happens after that? You're screwed. Well, so fans need to remind themselves of what the real timeline is on building a long-term successful club. It's kind of
to that point. And listen, it's not completely analogous, but I think it's fair enough. First 3 years of Atlanta United, they won a championship and they ripped off finishes in the league of 4th, 2nd, and 3rd. Since then, they finished 21st, 9th, 22nd, 9th, 20th, and they're 12th this year in MLS. To your point, They won a lot right off the bat, and they did win a title, and that's a salve for all wounds. Always has been, always will be. But things have fallen back. And part of that is because they weren't able to just continue just farming Argentina for cheap the way that they were those first 3 years. Other people figured that one out, which is what I thought City was going to do when they hit here. But then obviously Lutz has connections with different leagues, so you roll with the way what you got. Let's hit some more of these comments because you guys are doing great here on the chat here on Sports Hub STL City Hub post-game. Hayden Henelben says, I love Lutz too, but if he isn't going to do much to improve the roster, I feel like you got to make a change. That being said, he might not be getting much to work with to start. I mean, he added 3 players in the last summer window who are all, still playing pretty solid for the most part. Horn, looked really solid tonight. Wallum, who they added on loan, another good deal, really solid.
Baumgartel's been a great contributor.
Baumgartel's been a solid contributor. Xande Silva, again, we haven't seen a lot from him, but apparently people liked what they saw from him tonight. I think he isn't working with the biggest budget because, again, I think, and we talked about this on Twitter over the last forever, I think the team right now is spending a lot on stadium payments and spending a lot on the academy, and as I've been told by a lot of pay-for-play academies over the last 20 years in St. Louis, running academies costs a lot of money, everybody, so you got to give them some credit there. I always expect a team to reinvest transfer profits, and this team's had about $4 million in transfer profits. They've spent $1.5 million, $2 million total, maybe probably a little bit less than that. So you want to get really into the nitty-gritty of the money. People can be mad about that. That's a math equation that I'm not going to be mad about. I get it. People are going to be pissed about it. Fine. I just think I'm being real about the money. You can be mad about things, but I'm just being real about the money when it gets down to things. I like the moves that Lutz has made considering the money he's got. With that point, they have over $2 million in GAM after making a solid deal for Simon Bescher. You gotta, that's transfer money, but still, they have over $2 million in GAM. Spend it in the summer. That has to be used on a player in the summer, and they got to free up a roster spot. So they got to make moves. The machinations are weird, but you're getting play from young players like Mackay Joyner. You got to make moves, in my opinion. And you got to open up spots. You got to get rid of players who aren't giving you what they're supposed to. Changes undoubtedly have to be made on this roster, just like when they hit a point last year in July when it was changes had to be made, they felt on the coaching staff. So you can't say that they just don't make changes or they don't make moves so far. You might not like the moves, you might not think it's enough, but they are making moves to try to reset things when they feel like it's just not there so far. Trevor William Davis, why the constant deep block long ball play if our players don't have the speed to support going forward? Even when Klaus gets the ball to his feet, he's completely on his own and has zero support. Well, my statement to that, Trevor William Davis, and thank you very much for the comment, would be that they're not constantly playing in a deep block. They play a mid block a lot. Tonight they played probably the least amount of the high block than they had in the last 3 or 4 weeks. We were getting a pretty good dosage of them trying to press teams pretty high for a while there. They went back a little bit today, but a lot of it's in the mid block. So I just disagree that we're seeing a team constantly playing the deep block for the majority of this game. Last 40 minutes, you're just bunkering in, trying not to get your shit rocked. And still getting your shit rocked. And the long ball play thing for me is they're not good at short passes. When they try to pass the ball short, they turn the ball over. And so
you need Leuven in that midfield to do it.
I get people apparently in St. Louis hate just kicking it deep. That's in our DNA. But they're not good at it. They're bad at kicking the ball short. So fuck it, hoof it. That's where we're at this point.
Yeah, and look, everybody who's complaining about, oh, your kids play kick and chase in high school, I can guarantee it. It's some magic, in St. Louis that you just don't play kick and run. You're lying to yourself if you genuinely believe that. You're just completely wrong. And I understand that it's a soccer town. You want to play an attractive style of soccer, and I agree. I want to say I agree with that. But there's a but. When you don't have the players on the roster to do that, or they're injured in this case, like we're with Leuven, and obviously even with Leuven, it's still not that much better. You got to resort to other things. You got to use, the tools that are actually in your kit versus trying to, do some magic, some voodoo magic. So.
Yeah, I agree. Thomas Welch, horrible combination of poor results and boring, unentertaining soccer. Can't have both. And that is the real crux of this entire thing. Did I almost unplug my computer? All right,
see, that's the thing with Bradley Ball. Even when losing, you were running like a chicken with your head cut off. People, even if you were never in the match, fans felt like they were because it was so fast paced and City was just running around like crazy. Aziel Jackson was just fouling people left and right in the midfield for absolutely no reason. And everyone thought that was fun. And Big Sam was just bigger than everyone else. So everyone thought that was cool. And magically, people enjoyed that a lot more than what we're seeing now, even though the style we're playing now is technically better than what we were playing then. So
is it technically better? I would say yes. I completely disagree with that. No, it's not. It's not technically better. The passing quality of Edouard Leuven alone in 2023 is better than the entirety of the passing we've seen from City this year from every single player on the roster.
Yeah, I think including myself, by some people here, I kind of mean myself. I think I'm kind of forgetting that Edouard Leuven was really on an MVP track until he got injured at the start.
He was really good. And yeah, he was fantastic. He was fantastic that first season. I mean, there was a legitimate discussion the first 3 months, in my opinion, whether or not Leuven or Berkey was more impactful. And then if you go back and watch the games, it's Berkey because they were letting up a lot of meaty attempts there.
And that's Bradley Ball.
Yeah, exactly. Aaron Ed, with the regular season conference title year one, shouldn't mean we fall off a cliff 2 to 4 years just because we're an expansion team. Well, again, you're forgetting the first year was a dream. You broke everybody with with the first 5 games, and then they figured you out, and that's why the coach was fired half of the season later after winning the conference because it didn't work. Brad Neckerman, rough night, but it's okay. I'll trade a City loss tonight for a Blues win tomorrow. Let's go Blues. I think there's a lot of people who made that.
Yeah.
In fact, Charlie Smith's on our chat just trying to take this over and make it a Blues podcast. That's not how this works.
Let's talk about the Dallas Stars now. Here we go.
Blues need to come out hitting, firing away, puck control, no dumping into the Jets zone. First 10 minutes is everything tomorrow. Listen, he's not wrong. But
we got to manifest this win tomorrow. I want the Stars.
He sent that at 12:16 because we are into Sunday. That's not tomorrow. That's today, ladies and gentlemen. Brendan Kurtz, we play a boring style badly. Good way to lose fan interest quickly. Listen, that's not bad. You're not wrong 100%. That's exactly what Thomas was saying. At the same time, me and Will are podcasting angrier, and we're getting more viewers. So, we're going the opposite way here. Samuel Howe, I wonder what philosophical differences. Wait, I wonder about philosophical differences in organization academy play styles.
I don't think confirm from what I've known that it's supposed to be somewhat similar in the older demographic. Like when you get to the 17, 18 mark.
Yes,
they're playing very similar to what the current head coach is playing. That's kind of why a lot of those coaches in other organizations will come from their academy and work their way up because they're playing this similar style that the GM or the sporting director wants the club to play. So
yeah, and that's the way you should be doing things. I know people might not like the system, but that's how things work. LAFC success as well from the start. I wonder what the difference there is between LAFC and St. Louis City FC.
I don't want to take a crazy guess, but I would say that they're in fucking LA.
I wonder what the difference is. It might matter to things. If we turn into Cincy, I'm okay with a wooden spoon year 3. We're making concessions. We're selling our souls to the devil. That's fair.
I'm okay with it too.
Charlie Smith, so goodness sake. Thomas Welsh, do you think players we've sold have all been tidy deals too? Agreed. Yeah, listen, today people are reacting to the deal making from Lutz because 4 former City players scored today. But we got to give context to those moves, which is, as much as I was a big fan of Aziel Jackson and Anthony Marcanic, they struggled last year and were regressing after their progression in 2023. And so moving them,
they needed to change the scenery.
They needed to change the scenery. Indiana Vasilev's a really fine player. It was a beautiful goal today. I think he's getting to play in what I always thought would be a more natural position for him in the central midfield. But $1 million for him is a good deal, no matter any way you cut it. I don't care how many late arriving bangers he scores from 20 yards out. That's a good deal every time you make it. I am bothered by Jose Kojima. That one will bother me for a while because I thought they had the whole expansion draft kind of wrapped up, and they were confident they weren't going to lose anybody that was precious to them, and maybe they didn't think that highly of Kojima. I would disagree with that, especially because he was your first round pick. I know the super draft picks don't matter that much, but he was your super draft pick. You played him. He scored a goal. He looked good. He was clearly an intelligent soccer player who I think bettered your team, and I think that's important. And so the Kojima one bothers me, but other than that, I'm not bothered by really any of the deals that we've seen Lutz make for the most part, and that's how you should, judge your sporting director.
Yeah, Kojima's tough because you can only protect so many players, and I'm yeah, that's
Will's getting yelled at.
Getting yelled at by my parents, my own podcast. But yeah, the Kojima one, that hurts because you can only protect so many players. I mean, if you think about it, Joachim Nielsen was unprotected too, in that there was numerous players from City that they didn't really have an option because you have to protect what's most valuable. And unfortunately, Kojima was worth a pretty penny, and San Diego smartly flipped him for a lot of money, and St. Louis profited basically nothing off of that. So it's tough, but there's not a lot you can do about that. It's hard to criticize Lutz for that, is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Samuel Pozas says that you guys talked about how City were actually doing better 11 games in last year. Funny you bring that up. I was actually looking at that last year because coming into the game, they had 10 points through 10 games, which would be a worse pace than last year when they had just over 1 point per game. I think they were sitting at 13 or 14. I think they were sitting at 13 points through 10 games last year. So obviously now City's still sitting only at 10 games through 11 games. I'm not sure what they did last year in game number 11, but bottom line, the stats still stand. Sammy Pozas is 100% correct. It has officially broken that they are worse this year at this point than they were last year. The first 7 games, I think they were either better this year or it was breaking in favor, or it was even. Now it is officially breaking towards 2024. And that was the start of a season where they fired a coach at midseason. So I understand why Sammy's bringing it up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to compare to last season for me. Last season, I mean, Bradley Carnell had already had a year of coaching. It was a similar roster to what he'd been working with before. Now you bring in a new coach, and he makes his MLS debut in the first match of the season. You bring in, it's mostly the same roster from last season. Don't get me wrong, but the style is a lot different from Hack Ball or from Bradley Ball. So I don't know. It's a little hard to compare them, but at the same time, regardless of the comparison, 10 points through 11 matches is unacceptable. There's no sugarcoating that. And there's really no way around that. But it's kind of tough to compare 2024 to 2025 because of how different yet somehow similar they were in different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean it's always fair to criticize them between those two things. City are 2 games away from matching their 9-game winless streak from last year. By the way, yeah, we talked about that earlier.
It's not going to happen.
Drop points in 7 straight games. You don't think it's going to happen? All right, then call your shot. They're coming up. You don't get to count Union Omaha in the Open Cup. They're coming up. Their next 2 matches are home matches against San Diego on the 10th, and then 4 days later they host Sporting Kansas City. They got dominated by San Diego, but did get away with a point. And then obviously the Kansas City game was an abomination. So, Will, which one are they going to win?
This is going to be bold, but they're winning both, and I will stand by that. I'm extremely confident in that, and I'll tell you why. You're getting your 2 biggest leaders besides Marcel Hartl back on the pitch. You're getting Roman Berkey and you're getting Edouard Leuven to be healthy contributors, right? And you're also getting potentially Reed, not Totland. Totland probably won't be back. Kessler probably won't be back. Durkin probably won't be back. But you're getting Reed. You're getting JGR for depth if you need it. You probably won't use him. And Horn's fully healthy. Nielsen's fully healthy. Yaro and Hebert are there. And now you have Zane Silva, who's made his debut. And that's the key for me. You got Leuven, Berkey, Zane Silva made his debut. Celio is out of the penalty box, hopefully with Melberg after the turnover from last match. I'd like to think outside of fitness, that's the only potential reason that he wouldn't be in the 11 or even subbing onto the pitch tonight. So all of that said, you're at home in front of your fans. St. Louis is rallying behind the Blues right now. It's going to be an exciting atmosphere. I don't think there's any chance in hell that City managed to lose both of those matches. I think they win at least one. And I think it's actually very likely they win both. And
is it just like your
potentially try
youth?
and route their ship.
Is that how you're still positive after this night? Is it just because you're young and not broken yet? Has life not shattered you into this is when you are broken, Will. See, when you're walking around and parts of you are kept
Grandpa's office medicine again. Here we go.
Yep, but when you're put together by tape in certain ways, these things like tonight will rattle you and something will fall off and you gotta put it back on. You little perfect little porcelain doll, never shattered or anything, with the positivity that they're gonna win 2 games after this. All right, we might have to go off the air and make a bet on that one because
hey, I'll put money down.
That's fair. I don't think so. Hayden Hendelman, thoughts on how Toy Shirt looked under Hack compared to this year under Olaf? My thoughts on Toy Shirt are simple. He was better in that 9.5 role in that system, and they're finally putting him there. And last week they moved him centrally in the second half. He got a goal. Today they moved him centrally. It didn't work, but at least they're putting him in a spot where he's been better. He got a lot of lucky balls that kind of fell to him, kind of like his first goal this season last year, where he was just charging through the middle and a play happened in front of him. The ball falls to him and he finishes. So he was better last year under Hack. There's no doubt. But he was also, but the circumstances around him were also much, much better. And that's always going to factor in, especially with an offensive player like him, who isn't ball dominant, who's not going to create his own chances a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I honestly have nothing else to add. You said exactly what I would have said about that.
Sebastian Starrett, that is a freaking awesome name. At least it was nice to see Joyner get some time. Looked good too, especially with the state of the team as a whole. The one little bright spot of the night. I would agree with that. My wonder would just be, why is he the first one, or why is he one of the first ones coming in? My theory is that he's a right dominant player, or he can play the right. I think he's better on the left, but he can play the right. Where Xande Silva and Celio Pompeu are guys who are either on the left wing as kind of like left wing strikers, or essentially just left wing strikers. And that's where Silva was playing today. He was playing as a striker. And so I think that's why Joyner was in. I was happy to see him. I really want to see Joyner get to start on Wednesday. The rules in the MLS are finally allowed that younger players get a little bit more freedom. And so non-roster players like him. So he's on the roster, but he's in a special non-designated roster spot, him and Tyson Pierce. Where they can play cup matches that don't count towards their 6 potential call-ups. So I really, really, really want to see Joyner get to start on Wednesday. I see zero reason why he wouldn't. Clearly, Olaf likes him. Clearly, Olaf trusts him. Put him in against the USL 1 team, no doubt.
I completely agree, and I think it's highly likely that he starts. I think it's highly likely that in the U.S. Open Cup squad for St. Louis, they bring in a couple other young players in that supplemental roster. I'm not sure exactly what the rules are for the rosters of the Open Cup, but I'm sure we'll see more young players than just Pierce and Joyner. I think both of them will play. I think Joyner will start. I think a lot of them will get significant minutes, especially in the first round, maybe 2 rounds. If Louisville upsets Minnesota and St. Louis wins, and then the second round would be against Louisville, I think we'd see a similar situation. So
Trevor William Davis bringing up JGR. When do you think we use him and how? Yeah, Olaf talked about JGR in the pre-match press conference on Thursday. He's on his way back. I wonder if we're going to see him in a bench role on Wednesday, but I think a better chance would be a bench role, maybe coming off late, trying to protect something against San Diego, or maybe a midweek match if they are facing off again. If they do win Union Omaha, that next midweek match coming off in their next round of the U.S. Open Cup, maybe that's when JGR comes in. They appear to like him more as a defensive midfielder than a center back. And in this system, I think he can be used as both, because we see that they like sometimes with guys like Baumgartel who have that ability to step up in kind of a sweeper mode. So I think JGR has some versatility across levels for City once he is healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be better at that, center defensive mid role in general in the system. There's too many center backs. He's younger, hasn't really proven himself there. He wasn't even doing that amazing at center back in Australia before coming to City. So I think that center defensive mid role is where he'll be kind of a depth piece.
Yeah, that's fair. What are your thoughts on JGR as a whole? $800K for a whole lot of nothing as of right now. All right, you guys got to gird yourself for how soccer works. You pay for young players because they're of the potential, and more so in any other sport, I think you're going to hit and miss on spending a lot of money on guys who just aren't going to do anything because you get them when they're 18 and they just don't ever grow. JGR is 20 years old, and aside from the youth players on the roster, he's the youngest player on this team's roster. Yeah. You got to give him time. You can't be judging 800K right now when the guy's been hurt, hasn't been able to have an impact, and is still only 20 years old. This is not the time to start calling up the ticket on JGR and wondering if it was a bad move or not. That's too early.
Yeah, and look, his contract runs through 2027 with an option in 2028. This was never a short-term impact deal. He was never going to have an impact before probably 2026. So I don't really expect much of anything from him this year. Obviously, if we do get something from him this year, great. But I don't really foresee that happening.
Looking here at some other comments we're getting on the other lines here. CJ Maloney, aren't happy is an understatement relative to where he's at on his city thoughts. Yeah, a lot of fans not too happy with this. And I don't blame him. It's hard to be okay with what's going on here. But yeah, there's Blues hockey. We can talk about that. And hey, let's talk about a little baseball as well, because don't we all just love talking about a little baseball? I like to use my DraftKings Pick 6 app to do a little basketball. In fact, my Pick 6 today went very well on Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. I played some Nuggets heavy. I went against some of the big-time Clippers, especially James Harden. Hard to see that one coming, because of all the history. So anyhow, baseball season, that's what you can use for your DraftKings Pick 6, and it's officially underway, and it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings Pick 6. Think of DraftKings Pick 6 as your fastball right down the middle. It's time to hit a homer on your picks. It's the easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at a big win. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Cash in your baseball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 with DraftKings.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Everyone's still getting involved on the chat, and we'd love to see that. Brendan Kurtz, have we mentioned that Cardinals' side has 22 points and a plus 11 goal differential? No, because I think it's kind of immaterial because I don't remember anybody coming to the defense of Bradley Carnell when they fired him last year. The group of people who were like, are they pulling the trigger a little early, was small. And I know that because I was taking a lot of crap for being one of those people who thought it might be a little bit early, considering they hadn't gotten the reinforcements that they eventually did get and eventually really helped the team. So we can't do this. We can't do this post hoc ergo propter hoc stuff every time. We can't do this hindsight 2020 thing. We got to deal with it in the moment. Were you, as a City fan, Brendan Kurtz, mad when they fired Bradley Carnell? Bottom line on the question. If you weren't, then let's have a discourse, because I think they might have pulled the trigger a little bit too early. But everyone was happy. Everyone complained about energy drink football in some ways for very good reason. I was just bothered by, I thought you could still probably play that style without bombing your fullbacks every game without any help behind them. I thought that was a pretty good way just to play a mid-ground. But I'm not the coach, and they didn't do that, and he got fired because of it. And maybe he learned his lesson, and that's why he's having the success. Or maybe Bradley Carnell is just a really good first-season coach. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's working with a completely different roster.
That too.
And Lutz didn't want to build in the direction that Carnell did. It was obvious that they didn't see eye to eye on the way that the team should play exactly. Lutz obviously wants City 2.0. He didn't like what was going on in City 1.0. So I don't think it was necessarily too early. I really think it was the perfect time to do it. And if you were going to do it at all last season, I think it had to be done when it was done.
Yeah, I would have liked to see, I would have liked to see what this team would have looked like with Marcel Hartle, Cedric Toyshirt, and company under Bradley Carnell. Brandon Kurtz, surprised for sure, thought it was misplaced blame. Mad, not mad or happy. Well, I think that's a very fair way to look at it. That's probably where that's probably a good description of where I was for the firing of Bradley Carnell. And so I think there's a lot of reasons to criticize what he was doing on the defensive side. He was also dealing with a ton of injuries at the same time. We'll see if he can sustain that success across multiple seasons with Philadelphia. And if he does, maybe they made the wrong choice. But in the moment, I feel like there's not a lot of fans who can claim they're not operating with hindsight if they go back and criticize the Carnell firing or look at what he's doing. And also, I do want to point out, it's not like he's getting that much more funding in Philadelphia, because if you ask any Philadelphia fan, that's an organization that's been around for a long time and is currently cheaping out. You know, they're letting legends of their franchise walk away because they don't want to pay them. So, I mean, he's also dealing with a cut rate roster and having success again. So maybe it's just, you know, the first year magic touch of Bradley Carnell, because clearly he's finding success again, and that's a fair point.
I completely agree.
Can you change coaches every year in soccer? There are some teams, there are some franchises across the world who would say, yes, you can. Why do we keep sucking? I can't figure out why.
Logistically, technically, you can.
Technically.
I mean, if you want to keep buying them out and paying stupid contracts, sure.
Yeah, they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bad night tonight, everyone. Thanks so much for everyone joining us here in the chat. We're going to keep going here. It's a late morning here in St. Louis as they fall to Seattle 4-1. It was a rematch of a 1-0 match where they didn't really dominate the game, but they at least controlled that home match against Seattle. Seattle has improved by a large margin since that game, but they were missing some of their best offensive players, including Jesus Ferreira and Jordan Morris, and they put 4 on you, and they completely controlled the game. Again, touches in the box, 51-9. Shots on target, total shots, 29-7. Shots off target, 17-2. Shots on target, 8-4. 20 shots inside the box allowed by St. Louis City. There's no way Ben Loon was going to be stopping, you know, more than he did on that factor. Just a disappointing game all around from St. Louis City.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, like, you know, we opened up saying it's just not good enough. And you necessarily aren't expecting a win, you know, in that match. It's not a must-win situation or anything like that where, you know, this is a bad team, we should be beating them every time. But you expect at least a better performance than that. Even if you're not going to come away with 3 points or even 1, it can't be that bad. There's no excusing that. It sucked. Speaking of must win, though, I do want to, you know, look forward to, you know, to next weekend in hosting San Diego FC.
Crazy.
But I just want to say, and regardless of what I think about what's going to happen, I want to talk about how, in my opinion, this is becoming a must-win situation for St. Louis City SC, because now you're falling, you know, significantly behind in the standings, where you know, making a recovery is going to be even more daunting. Every single time you win a match, you're still looking straight upwards at the team above you, and you know, it's a tough situation to be in. So for me, you're getting some key players back. You're, you know, getting a little bit healthier. You're at home. You know, St. Louis is bumping right now. Enterprise Center has been going crazy with the Blues. Obviously, the Cardinals aren't really doing anything special, but St. Louis fans want something to cheer for. And I think this is a must-win situation against San Diego. I think that it's a must-win situation the following weekend against Sporting Kansas City. At home, rivalry match. You got embarrassed on the road just a few weeks ago in the same rivalry match. You cannot lose those 2 matches, in my eyes, to consider, you know, if you're going to have a successful season. You cannot lose those 2 matches. That's just going to completely send everything in a downward spiral. And at the very worst, you need to be coming away with a draw against San Diego and a win over Sporting Kansas City at the worst. So it's a tall task. For a team that hasn't won in 7 straight matches. So obviously the last time St. Louis won a match was against Seattle on March 15th at Energizer Park. And that match, like Rock just got done saying, it wasn't domination from City. It was a great Edouard Lubin set piece that made the difference, and some decent play from St. Louis City. They completely limited Seattle's chances, but they didn't do a whole ton on attack themselves. So you get into this situation now against San Diego at home. and now things are looking grim in the standings. Obviously, it's still
Yes,
very early in the season. You're a third of the way through the season now, plenty of time, but you got to start making up ground or it's going to be impossible down the stretch. So, for you, Rock, looking at these next two matches, I want to know how much of a must-win like situation are you looking at in these two matches? How important do you see? And we'll start with San Diego match next weekend.
Well, I will tell you, Will, but before I do, I want to tell everybody with our good friends over at Hot Shots. Of course, Sports Hub, STL, and City Hub postgame is presented by Hot Shots Sports Bar. All the games on the time, all the time. You're home for St. Louis sports since 1990. Well, because of that, let's do a little math. Home of St. Louis sports since 1990. That means they're turning 35 this year. Celebrate 35 years of Hot Shots with our good friends at Hot Shots. STL Hub post-game shows are brought to you in part by Hot Shots, so they invite you to come out to their St. Charles location on June 1st to celebrate their 35th anniversary. The fun starts at noon with a parking lot party featuring the Budweiser Clydesdales. Prizes will be given away all day. There's a dart tournament at noon, a bags tournament too, plus a chance to win Hot Shots tacos for a year. How do you win Hot Shots tacos for a year? You just have to eat the most Hot Shots tacos. It's honestly the perfect way to decide the winner. Congratulations to Hot Shots on 35 years. Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games, all the times since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com. And if you're a St. Louis City SC fan, they're getting celeb bartenders from St. Louis City SC. And with the Pitch Athletic Club, they do events like that, and these city players are really great at those events. So get out there to that party again Sunday, June 1st, starting at 12 p.m. Just an entire day's worth of things to do there. And get out there because I will be participating in that taco eating contest because they're Jack in the Box style, and I cannot stay away from them. So you're asking me about the games. Well, first of all, you got to get through Union Omaha, and you should be able to, but the bottom line is you got to field 11 players. You're not going to field all 11 players youth. So some of these players who are nominal starters or role players are going to have to step up and get a win. This loss tonight felt different than the other losses. This felt like the worst game of the season by far.
100%.
Now you have three matches in your home stadium inside of 7 days to change the fans' optic mind. Give them a "what have you done for me lately" moment that overlaps all the crap they've had to watch tonight and the week before. And you have to step up and do it. I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to pull 3 points from anybody other than Union Omaha, who they don't get points from because it's a cup match. I don't see why I should have any reason that they're going to be able to break down San Diego after what we saw in that first game. Clearly, at this point, we've seen this isn't the coaching staff that's going to 100% outthink another staff and outwit them completely with the game plan when you see them a second time because they just got completely pantsed by the Seattle Sounders. Credit to the Seattle Sounders on there. I'm not saying it's only because City, wasn't as good, but they weren't. And so I don't have a lot of confidence that they can take a home match against San Diego and show up that much better. Although, they did win a game against Seattle at home and get rocked away. So maybe that plays out. Maybe they're just that good away at home and that good away. But I don't have a lot of confidence with the way that their passing is that they're going to be able to break down the press from San Diego that we saw, and that they're going to be able to withstand the passing network that we saw San Diego put together at times in that game. So I'm not feeling great about the San Diego game. Kansas City is not a very good team. You should be able to beat them. If you can't, full on alarm bells going into June, ladies and gentlemen, because if you can't beat Kansas City at home,
transfer everyone out.
Everyone's going to be pissed off to an unholy level in the city, and there's going to be very little to show for these first 3 months of this era of St. Louis City. And at that point, alarm bells are going to have to be going off. Matthe says big changes by Monday. Absolutely not. Still think it's too early. But man, if they lose to San Diego and lose to Kansas City at home,
I would expect some serious changes in the summer window.
It would take some legitimate and impressive gumption from the city brass to just stick with what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the wrong decision. I'm not saying it's the right decision. I'm saying that if they lose to Kansas City at home, I'd be surprised if we see the status quo continue into June. I guess that's the only take I can have in that moment, because what else do you do if we're talking about 9 straight games without dropping points and a season record against Kansas City of 0-2. That's inexcusable to a lot of City fans, and I can't blame them from that perspective.
I mean, it should be inexcusable. You can't be losing in your rivalry match when your rival sucks. I mean, that's just end of the day. That's where you're at. Kansas City's in. I don't even know if you want to call it a rebuild. They randomly signed Dejan Joveljic, who's a great striker, but other than that, their roster is kind of lackluster. They did bring in another DP as well. I'm blanking on who it was, but they've got a couple of good players, but it's not a great squad, and defensively they're not good. So if you're not putting in goals, at home against that team, you have a serious problem on your hands.
I think they might have a serious problem on their hands. Just some quotes here from Olaf Melberg as they've gotten sent to us. Nothing different than kind of what we were able to relay to you at the beginning of the podcast on what the team did not do well tonight in Seattle. This is Olaf Melberg in the press conference. I think, again, Seattle had too many chances. They didn't have that much before their penalty. So, again, up until that moment, I thought we did fairly well. Obviously, we wanted to create more chances, but I think we were the better team for the first 30 or 35 minutes. After that, they are much better than us in every way. So I think afterwards we will see that not much was working, and they completely dominated the game afterwards.
I like that he's ballsy and he's throwing it out there. He's taking accountability.
Yeah, that's pretty much all you can say. On being able to bounce back against Union Omaha, for me, it's not a problem. I'll be disappointed for a while now, but you must immediately start to work on the next one. I'm really looking forward to that one, to be able to bounce back as quickly as possible. That's the good thing after a really disappointing game, to have a game on Wednesday again, to be able to bounce back. And that's definitely our goal for me and for the players as well, to show off our best. And obviously, this is not part of the quote. The quote's over. This is me now saying it. Makes it a little bit easier to get to bounce back against the USL League One team.
Yeah, and anyone who's ever played any kind of competitive sport can attest to the fact that when you have a bad loss, the easiest way and the most favorable position that you can be in to try and rebound from that situation is to have a match quickly after, like quicker than you maybe would have otherwise. If you're having matches once a week, this time you have a midweek match that you can use to bounce back, get on track, and get back into your rhythm the following weekend. That's an ideal situation for City to be in, but you got to beat Union Omaha, and it needs to be convincing. It can't be a 1-0 with some random heroic from Simon Betcher that you sub on in the 80th minute because the match was a complete mess. It needs to be a domination. You got to play convincing ball. You need to get confidence into that team.
Samuel House says, so no more Moes, trust the process if they lose both. Listen, man, I'm here already, harping on the process because the process broke tonight. The process broke a little bit in LA. When you're seeing progress across the first few games of a brand new administration, I'm expecting up and downs. I'm expecting there to be question marks and things I can't answer, things they can't answer. But as things round out and you start getting an idea of what this club could be, should be, and is, then this is why things get a little bit more, objective, within our subjectivity tonight. This is why I'm being a little bit harsher tonight than I have been, because the process broke tonight. You did not. This is another game where they did not get points, or only got 1 point for all those previous games, but they didn't progress from the week before. They regressed greatly.
Yeah,
that's why. And listen, that's why the Kansas City game was rough. But that was hitting the 1/3 mark of the season feels different than the early mark of the Kansas City game. So you're still willing to say, okay, a lot of injuries. What do you have? But putting the lineup out that they put out, I question the process on that. I question, what they're doing to get the most out of the players on the field, because we're not getting it out of the players. Like I said, Marcel Hardo is just missing passes in the second half. How much is that a blame on the system? How much is that a blame on the player? That's going to be more a subjective thing. I'll just say we blame both, because he's not executing in the moments that he's getting the ball there. But this is a game of large numbers, and the City isn't getting the ball there for him enough. Because would we be harping on the misses if he was 3 of 6 instead of 1 for 4? No, that we wouldn't be harping on the 3 misses as much, because 1 for 4, you're not going to score any goals on 1 for 4. You got a much better chance getting goals out of 3 for 6 from the 3 chances. Much better chance. That's just how the sport works. And they're not creating opportunities right now. They're not creating chances. They didn't do it in the first half. They didn't do it in the second half. Another West Coast game where they touched the ball in the opposing box under double-digit times. They do not have clinical finishers unless it's Edward Leuven, who didn't play until the end of the game. No one else is going to put anything deep from this team. They got 3 shots inside the box and 4 shots outside the box from their touches in the final third. It's not good enough, and they don't have finishers good enough to put shots into the back of the net with the chances they're getting. They have to get a glut of chances to eventually break things in. And right now, it's not enough. And at the last few weeks, the defense hasn't been good enough to slow things down and play the 0-0 games like they did against Colorado and San Diego to start the season. And so it simply isn't good enough. And when you're not good enough, that's why you get dominated. And that's what happened tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you said it very well. It's like you're in a situation now where every single game is another knock on the confidence if you continue to go in a downhill trajectory. And that's why, again, I'm talking about San Diego next weekend. It's kind of a must-win match, and I think you got to come out firing. And I think, the Omaha match in the midweek in the Cup is a great opportunity to kind of get the head leveled and see what can happen when you return to MLS play.
Yeah, it's got to be better, because right now it's not good enough. By the way, Olaf was also asked about Edward Leuven. You didn't want to use Leuven early for the Ostrak exit since he's been out so long with so little training, but he ultimately noted, quote unquote, we don't have any other central midfielders. Yeah. We were talking about it in the presser afterwards. They're literally, Akil Watts was the only other player that could play central midfield other than Edward Leuven to replace Alfredo Morales. And you knew Leuven wasn't going to start or play that much because of that, but ultimately they just don't have enough. And that's problematic, because the Leuven absence combined with the Durkin injury has been horrible, and it's really hurt this team. It's put Marcel Hartl away from the goal, and that's been one of the main reasons that the system hasn't worked. And so maybe there is some window there of, do you judge Olaf's system on 8, 6, 7? The majority of games, though, more than half of the games, he has not been able to play his ideal system. How much does that factor in? I'm not sure. Like you said, this is the first season, not the second season. So do you give him more leeway? I don't think fans want to hear leeway for this coach. But if we're being logical, he hasn't gotten to play his optimal team since the first 3 or 4 weeks. What would this team look like when everyone's healthy and everyone's at full fitness? That's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. But just getting Leuven back healthy and being able to play Hartl higher up, I think it 100% would give us a better look at what this team is supposed to be. But we haven't got to see that. And when we did see it early in the season, they weren't finishing any of the attempts they were creating. And so we don't necessarily have any good things to look back at either. They were creating more, but it didn't get you any points to help buffer the fact that you suck now. So that's rough. And like you said, unless they turn things around over the next 10 days, 2 weeks, big questions have to be asked, and they have to find answers, because people are angry, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it now.
Yeah, and listen, I think the month of May is going to turn out to be the most important and pivotal month in this 2025 campaign for St. Louis City SC, because at the end of the day, you've got the summer transfer window coming up. You got a lot of players, like Joao Klaus in contract years. How many of these players, if things don't go well in the month of May, where you've got all this match congestion, maybe get some more injuries, how many of these players do you look to ship off and maybe replace some personnel in this summer window? At what point is Lutz going to say, we're a little too far down. Let's see if we can, shake things up in the summer.
2 changes. You got to get somebody off the roster and use the $2 million on one player, because I know that their depth has been exposed this year, but I think, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, they need some gamers. And I think getting a one piece who improves this side is better than repairing the depth, because I think they have a lot of good young players. I think the academy is producing talent, and I think they should start leaning on some of that talent. Guys like, and that's why Wednesday I want to, Tyson Pierce, Joey Zielinski, Miggy Perez, Mackay Joyner. Later in the game, maybe not the start, but later in the game, McSorley, Glover, maybe even Yaskalainen. I want to see these people play. I want to see these kids play, because I truly believe if they can step up, that money can go to a gamer who can take over a starting spot and potentially change this team. And because if they have good depth at some spots, if they're not completely just decimated everywhere, but they need better depth at a couple spots. And if they just had one or two more players, they have a couple multi-level players who can, when I say multi-level players, think about there being like 4 levels on the field: defense, defensive midfield, attacking midfield, and then kind of forward strikers last, pushing up attackers. Hartel clearly can play defensive and attacking midfield. JGR we talked about earlier, multi-level player, can play defense and offense. Conrad Vollum, multi-level player. So they have enough, I think, multi-level players across this roster. Tomas Ostrak, another great example. Celio Pompeu, another guy like that. They have enough of these guys that I think they really just need a gamer to come in that they can put in at one spot and say, you're starting 9 times out of 10, and just improve the overall quality of this team. They got $2 million to do it. And if we've seen the deals that have been made, I feel like they can get a damn solid player for $2 million.
Yeah, especially in MLS, players are being sold for, honestly, good players are being sold for a lot less than that right now. Or at least in the winter in this primary transfer window. So a lot of clubs are going to be looking to move things around in the summer window as well. Some clubs will be looking to replace, some of these players, sell somebody off to a team like St. Louis, and then maybe sign some kind of U22 or a DP, spend their money there. You got, teams who are in kind of a rebuild and maybe want to get rid of some of these younger players for cash. There's tons of options for St. Louis. So I think there's going to be a plethora of options come the summer window, but we've still got, 2 months before that opens up to try and figure things out in the short term. Talking about the Union Omaha match, more young players that I want to see really quickly. I did just want to mention Mickey Wenzel. Jay Reed could maybe get his feet under him, his first, match back, maybe not starting, but just get some minutes. Maybe get Zonde Silva a couple of minutes, probably, or definitely don't start him, but maybe get him like 20 minutes at the end of the match. I would love to see JGR, if healthy, maybe get some minutes. I think Mickey Wenzel, by the way, I know he's a slow player, but I really think he's solid. And I think he could turn out to be someone that City could sell down the line and get some money to reinvest. So I would love to see him get some minutes as well.
So maybe something like this. If you want to see more of this,
something like that.
Check out sportshubstl.com, because I ran down the decision they were making. I was correct about the lineup they would have tonight, and this was my best guess for Wednesday based on what I thought we would see tonight. A couple differences, things that did not happen that I thought would affect this lineup specifically. You can see it right there when I'm kind of breaking down the Joyner Silva decision there. I thought Celio would be coming off the bench tonight, and I figured he'd be a big factor in coming off the bench next week against San Diego. I'm not really sure if that's true anymore, so maybe it's Celio instead of Zonde, but you see it there, all the young players. I even think play a Roscoe, because at the point I pointed out, he's played the most minutes for City 2 this year as a Roscoe. That's the transfer they got very quietly to the City 2 team this past winter. I want to see him play as well. Play these young players. They beat Union Omaha, a very good USL side. They beat them 5-1 in that game. And in that game, Will Bratton, do you know who St. Louis City started at left back?
No.
You haven't read my piece yet. They started Selmir Pedro. St. Louis City won a game 5-1 where they started Selmir Pedro, who I respect a lot, but he just hasn't appeared very often and made an impact for City. But they won 5-1 in that game. And so they don't need – I know Lute said this is like the World Cup in Union Omaha, and they got to play their best available squad. This is, in my opinion, their best available squad. A lot of guys are tired. A lot of people are injured. In my opinion, this is the best available squad.
Yeah, I agree. I want to see Zelensky playing. I
Yes,
think we need to see
absolutely.
more of him.
I think the ones I'm most adamant about are Joyner and Zelensky playing 90 minutes. I cannot see why. I'm with you on Wenzel. He's been on the bench now for the last 6 matches for St. Louis City SC. I want to see Michael Wenzel. That entire right side, I think, is where I'm adamant. I want to see Mackay Joyner. I want to see Joey Zelensky. I want to see Michael Wenzel for a full 90. I understand at 17 years old, you might not want to play Tyson Pierce, but there's no reason why Tyson Pierce and Miggy Perez shouldn't also be getting minutes. Tyson Pierce is getting call-ups from the U8 team national camp. Miggy Perez was good enough to play for you 2 years ago. He's gotten more mature, both as a player and physically. There's no reason why we shouldn't see these players on Wednesday. They can bring you the win, and they can bring some excitement to St. Louis, who really wants to see St. Louis people succeed. Well, I got a crop them right here for you.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. For the fans of St. Louis City SC, this is what you want to see. This is how you re-engage the fans as well. You get the young players playing. You get the fans excited about the future. You give them hope, even if you're going to take it away when you get absolutely ripped apart at home by San Diego FC the following weekend. But I don't think that'll happen.
Now you're talking.
I don't think that's going to happen. I've got a little bit of faith. I think City are, these are professional athletes. I think they're going to come out and do what has to be done in a must-win situation with the season beginning to look a little grim about a third of the way through. But this U.S. Open Cup match, I want to see these young players, and I think that's a great way to get the fans engaged.
Fair enough. Well, we officially have wrapped up this show because we're talking about Wednesday, a big match in just 4 days. Well, now a little bit less than that for St. Louis City SC. Good morning to everyone here. Thank you so much for listening. You guys killed it here on the chat here on City Hub Postgame. I want to thank everyone again for joining us here. I want to thank Will Bratton for joining us. And, of course, our friends at Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill, home of St. Louis sports fans since 1990. Check them out. Find out the location nearest to you at hotshotsnet.com. Come see them on their 35th anniversary coming up in just a few weeks, more than a few weeks, but just coming up in just under a month, Sunday, June 1st. Get ready for that. It's going to be an absolutely great time with Hot Shots. And, of course, our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. This has been St. Louis City Hub postgame. Excuse me, can't get that one out. It's early, it's late, and I am ready for bed. So is St. Louis. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Will, thank you so much. Any final comments before we close out here?
Have hope, believe. Let's go Blues.
Jesus, the positivity. I don't even know why I gave you the last second. All right, everyone. Stay alive. Have a good night.